Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Get out, Django. That's great. Just chucking it out.
Paul, and this video we're breaking down House of the Dragon. The season 2 finale is finally here, and episode 8 has a lot to talk about. Throughout this video, we're going to be going through the entry and talking about all the Easter eggs and callbacks to the book. This will flesh out certain scenes and discuss how they were recorded in history, and also where we're going to be going for the future. I'll also be talking about what I think will happen in season 3, but I'll save that for the spoiler section at the end. So for the last time, please hit the thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe for more big breakdowns and lots of upcoming shows and movies. With that out the way, huge thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into House of the Dragon.
Dragons dance, and men are like dust under their feet.
Now the episode is titled The Queen Who Ever Was, with this being a play on The Queen Who Never Was. This was how the entire show started, with Rhaenys gaining that nickname after being looked over. This title now refers to the future, and the episode's laced with visions and prophecies that foreshadow this. We also have brand new graphics added to the opening tapestries, with the first of these being an extended look at the Battle of Rook's Rest. Originally we had a central view of it, with Aemon in the middle standing above the two dragons with Vhagar in the sky. However, we now extend beyond that to the dragon seeds and highlight all the conquered dragons that have now joined the fight. This then takes us to Thailand, who we catch meeting with the Lords of the Triarchy. In the book, we just learned that he hired sellswords, and it was originally Otto who met with the High Council in Tyrosh. Yeah, he's been given that arc though, with him having to win round the ship lords. Outside we can catch his ship and can see the green and golden sails which belong to supporters of Aegon. He's hired them to break the blockade so that food and so on can get to King's Landing again. However, come the end, Aegon ends up abandoning the castle. In order to win them round though, he has to offer the stepstones and also win round Sharako Lohar. Is it Sharako or Sharako? Moving on. Either way, Thailand is the master of coin, and he's pretty much bankrupting the Greens in order to make this play. Now if you recognise his actor, it's because it's Philosophy Tube. Nice little inclusion there, having them in the show, and I have to admit, I'm a little jealous and a little annoyed. When will Kevin's spoilers be in this series? I can read the book to you, I can do a mediocre book voice. Watching Thailand get shoved in the mud though is great, and it's a brilliant character moment. Now being Philosophy Tube, I did wonder if that's why we got this line.
A philosopher.
They also do a great thing where they have her smiling and then play the sound of Vhagar over it so it sounds like a growl. Now, the destruction of Sharp Point is a major talking point of the episode, with it being a big thing that Aemon's done. He's pretty much just breaking all the rules, and when we look at it, he's the one who's constantly upping the ante. Like Jon Snow, or any of the other Targaryens that have been up in their ante. He of course killed Luke, and the rule was in negotiation times, you weren't supposed to kill an envoy. On top of this was from his own kin, which gave him the accursed nickname Kinslayer. In Westeros, this was said to be one of the worst things you could be, and he of course also tried to kill his brother. Now he's terrorizing the innocents at Sharp Point. Founded during an Andal invasion, it helped to establish a new kingdom on Massey Hook. It's terrifying knowing what he's capable of, and Vhagar flies over the location, dominating the skyline. Now on the opposite side of this is his brother Aegon, who's powerless and resigned to his bed. Begging for rum to help ease the pain, the work discusses how he became dependent on milk of the poppy. In the work, it's described as him constantly being in poppy dreams. Orwell offers him some, but Larys steps in to totally ruin the moment. 8 weeks of foot puns and we're doing step as one. Kill me. Now he tells Aegon that they need to leave King's Landing, and he brings news of the 3 new dragon riders. He also lays it out that Aemon's a big heel and that he'll kill Aegon. Now Aegon's had a really big arc over the last 2 seasons, and this feels like the natural culmination of it. Originally, he never wanted to be king, and Alicent even admitted to propping him on the throne. Left bedbound after leaping into battle, he's now been ousted from inside his own house. It's karma for usurping his sister, but now he's realized he wants to fight for the throne. Or play things a little differently and more strategically, let's say. Now Larys finally explains what he did with the gold he moved to Harrenhal, which is something he's talked about throughout the season. He wants to run away to Bravos. Run's not really a foot pun, but he says they can lay low there. Aegon has kind of resigned himself to just wasting away in the bed, and yeah, the guy goes into a lot of detail about how his dick don't work.
My dick don't work, man. I got to piss in a plastic bag, man. I got no dick.
Burst like a sausage. Now, I love this scene as a whole though, because it kind of fleshes things out that aren't touched upon in the work. We know that he left King's Landing, but don't know how. However, the guy was lured by being Aegon the Realm's Delight. The Realm's Delight was of course Rhaenyra's original nickname, and he sees himself as being beloved. He just wants to take things easy and let the rest of the family wipe themselves out. The plan is to then return as a hero, which we'll see how that goes down the line. I also felt this was similar to Alicent offering Rhaenyra to run away together at the end, with all these characters sharing some kinship. It basically means Aegon won't be there for Rhaenyra Storm's King's Landing, and it could make it look like Alicent's gone back on the deal. The idea of there being no money in the realms also hammered home here, with both Tywin and Larys' actions having major repercussions. Now, we know what the mood of the Red Keep was like due to the work saying, "The sight of them," meaning dragons, incited terror in the streets of the city below. But the small folk were not slow to realize that the attack they had dreaded was at last at hand. Prince Aemon and Sir Criston had denuded King's Landing of defenders when they set forth to retake Harrenhal, and the Kinslayer had taken Vhagar, that fearsome beast, leaving only Dreamfire and a handful of half-grown hatchlings to oppose the Queen's dragons. Young dragons had never been ridden, and Dreamfire's rider, Queen Helena, was a broken woman. The city had been dragonless. This is why Helena refuses to ride, though it does go a bit more complex in the show. Now, having two sides in this war makes it difficult to know who to trust. There's a lot of misinformation and bias in Westeros, and you could say it reflects the world today. Staying up to date with things when you don't know what the truth is can be difficult, but that's where our sponsors Straight Arrow News comes in. They report right down the middle with the facts and don't push any bias or spin to help fuel a narrative. The site has a wide range of topics from politics to tech, but they're not trying to make you think a certain way. They also have the Media Mist tool, which lets you look at stories that are often underreported or not reported at all. On top of this, the site has an opinion section which possesses both left and right voices, so you can see things by the opposite sides and then make up your own mind. Straight Arrow News are so good at delivering the news, they've been awarded by independent experts at all sides and Ad Fontes Media, who regularly assess the reliability of news outlets. They verified Straight Arrow News as being unbiased and have awarded them with the Center rating and Balance certification. We're in the midst of a big election year, and there's a lot of reports coming out constantly. Stay on top of it without the bias or spin by going to Straight Arrow News. Go to san.com/spoilers to check it out. You can also subscribe through my link in the description below. On top of that, we have a QR code on screen right now, so you can go directly to the app. When you subscribe, you not only support me, but you're also supporting a group of journalists that are raising the bar on news and focused on serving you the truth. Huge thank you again to Straight Arrow News for sponsoring the video. Now, let's get into the rest of the breakdown. Now, at the painted table, we have a bit of back and forth with Jason Ulf. Guy sitting in the King's or Queen's chair, just kicking his feet up and taking the bloody mick. He calls Jace boy, makes fun of his hair and his strong features. Jace is obviously panicking because of Sharppoint and the fact that these could oust him, and he tries to tell Ulf the reality of war. Ulf still isn't taking it seriously by the end though, and this tension here is going to have major repercussions down the line. Next we cut to the shipyard to see Corlys and Rhaenyra, with the former expressing guilt over not being there for his bastard sons.
Adam of Hull, at least, is known to you.
I've had little to do with him, to my regret.
Now at this point they bring up the dragon Dreamfire, which hatched when Aegon the Conqueror was king. A slender dragon known for its blue and silver markings, it was born in 35 AC. Originally a boner with Rhaena Targaryen, which the one in the series is named after. Rhaena was Aegon's first grandchild and she ended up marrying her brother. He hadn't claimed a dragon at the time though, which seemed embarrassing, yeah? Most embarrassing part of that relationship, because she was out there riding one whilst he wasn't. So Dreamfire was made to remain in King's Landing. Then the civil war with Maegor the Cruel and Jaehaerys broke out and the entire kingdom collapsed. Either way, Rhaenyra tries to play down the fears that Helena could be brought into the war. However, Corlys rightly says Aemond arrogantly thought he was the top dog, and he's realised he's not. He doesn't want her to make that mistake, and also thinks that Aemond will be trying to pull people together. Corlys then tells Rhae he's renamed his ship, as the previous name Sea Snake was for his own glory. Now it's called the Queen Who Never Was, which is of of course, not only are tied to the episode title, but also his late wife. We've been watching this ship get fixed up for the whole season, and in the end, it's finally ready to sail. Though Rhaenyra just wants to use her dragons as a deterrent, all it's going to do is cause escalation. Aemond is a hothead that can't be diplomatic, so there's no way to get things to de-escalate without war. Anyway, from here we cut to Harrenhal.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now in the book, Daemon was as bored as the rest of us, sitting around Harrenhal waiting for the Greens to march. When he finally got word and mounted up to fight them, the work said, Daemon Targaryen was too old and seasoned a battler to sit idly by and let himself be penned up inside walls. Even walls as massive as Harrenhal's. The prince still had friends in King's Landing, and word of his nephew's plans had reached him even before Aemond had set out. When told that Aemon and Sir Criston Cole had left King's Landing, it said Prince Daemon laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, past time." Terrible impression, but for he had long anticipated this moment. A murderer of ravens took flight from the twisted towers of Harrenhal. We see as Alfred arrives in Owana, and he tries to talk Daemon into becoming the king. Described as being a turncoat in the book, Daemon labels him such with his scheming and conniving. I love how when he's trying to pitch his plans, we also have whispers of Harrenhal trying to put him off. Reminded me a lot of the Mummy when there's weird noises, and it says it happens around here a lot, which it does. Now, Alfred thinks they need a king leading, but we very much have the same problem the Greens have with Aemond. Luckily, Sir Simon sees it, which plays into his actions. Back at the Red Keep, Aemon learns how the dragon seeds got to dragon stones, and he instructs that they now have to inspect every boat that leaves King's Landing. It's a grip that is no doubt going to be unpopular, and it will hinder the work of the people. He needs to muster up as many riders as quickly as possible, though, and thus he desperately goes to his sister. Now we see Alicent talking to Helena about the issues of being in charge. The people blame the Greens for what's going on, but they also expect them to fix it. Unfortunately, everyone on the council's out their depth, and the two people who run stuff well have now been fired. They've been looked to as the people to hate, and Helena says she was happier before she became queen. Alicent asks if she would leave King's Landing, but Helena doesn't know where she would go. This explains something coming down the line, which I'll talk more about in the spoiler section. At this point, Aemon then enters, demanding her service as a dragon rider. Now this bit with Aemon and his drive throughout the episode is slightly touched upon in the book. A similar resolve had taken root across the bay in the breast of Aemon Targaryen, ruling in his brother's name whilst Aegon lay abed. Contemptuous of his half-sister Rhaenyra, Aemon One-Eye saw a greater threat in his uncle Prince Daemon and the great host he'd gathered at Harrenhal. Summoning his bannermen in council, the prince announced his intent to bring battle to his uncle and chastise the rebellious river lords. Here, we also see as he's angered by the fact that Rhaenyra's turned commoners into dragon lords. He sees the Greens as being respectful of the creatures, but it was under him that Maelyse's head was marched through the kingdom. There we saw as peasants question whether the dragons were gods or not, and Hugh of course was standing by the guy who said this. This may have been what helped to give him the courage to go to Dragonstone, so the Greens doing this has in fact backfired. Grabbing Helena, he pulls her by her arm, which causes Alicent to step up and get involved. She knows he's burned cities and villages, and the book brought up how the Tullys were terrified of his terrorism in the Riverlands. He leads with cruelty and true fear, which Alicent says is the wrong way to go. It makes him akin to Daemon, who we've seen also doing the same thing. In the end, he had to cut down one of his own supporters to get what he wanted. Leading with fear and hate also leads to people hating the leaders, and thus in the end, they always tend to rebel. So it's not a good way to go, and Alicent also talks about how killing would break Helena's mind, and we know in the work that the character went insane. This was after the events of Blood and Cheese, whereas here, I feel like it may be once she witnesses all the death and destruction. That's a theory though, it's not a spoiler. Now Alicent berating Aemond here is sort of touched upon in the work, and we know that she was urging caution while he just wanted to ride into battle. Not all the members of the Green Council favoured the prince's bold stroke. Aemond had the support of Sir Criston Cole and that of Sir Tywin Lannister, but Grand Maester Orwell urged him to send word to Storm's End and add the power of House Baratheon to his own before proceeding. And Ironrod, Lord Jasper Wilde declared that he should summon Lord Hightower and Prince Daeron from the south, on the grounds that 2 dragons are better than 1. The Queen Dowager favoured caution as well, urging her son to wait until his brother the king and his dragon Sunfire the Golden were healed, so they might join the attack. Now, one thing you might also notice is that Alicent's no longer wearing her Faith of the Seven jewelry. This is something she adopted throughout the first season, and she transformed the keep to reflect this. However, Thing's story last week pointed out that she removed this when going into the lake, where she went into a Christ-like pose. He said this was almost like a baptism, and now it's like it's cleansed her of her faith, and she's more gripped by reality. In opposite to this, Rhaenyra's becoming more religious, with her discussing the gods more and more. Thing's story also pointed out that on the approach to the lake, her dress looked more blue than green. This is a colour she adopted at the start of season 1, which highlighted her innocence. It was only upon going to the wedding that she started wearing green, whereas now it seems like she's going back towards those colours. Now there's a lot of back and forth here, with it being slightly different to what happens in the book. In that we're told Aemon wanted all the glory for himself, and this was the reason for his impatience. Prince Aemon had no taste for such delays, however. He had no need of his brothers or their dragons, he declared. Aegon was too badly hurt, Daeron too young. Caraxes was a fearsome beast, savage, cunning and battle-tested, but Baegor was older, fiercer and twice as large. Septon Eustace tells us that the Kinslayer was determined this should be his victory. He had no wish to share the glory with his brothers, nor any other man. The series has changed things up though, with Daeron and his dragon Tessarion not being something he's opposed to. Here I feel like though he pretends to care about what's best for the realm, but he's clearly just worried about the family. He'll happily murder the small folk and turn his sister into a killer, all to keep his position. Anyway, Alicent goes to Orwell for passage, and we catch Criston looking over his dusty nutrag. This is the favour Alicent gave him before he rode to war, and I'm guessing Gwaine found that or a ginger hair in his bed. Either way, he knows that Criston must have broke his oath, and is basically looking for a reason to show why he's not a good man. Now you have to remember with Gwaine and the rest of the knights that this is the first time many of them have seen combat. Jaehaerys and Viserys created decades of peace back to back, and thus knights like him didn't really see battle. Not like they had TVs either, mate, so all that idea of wars, it came from songs.
The woman's hands are warm.
Criston was the only one who'd seen a battle before Rook's Rest, but even that's shaken him up. These guys just aren't equipped to deal with the magnitude of something like a dragon that can swoop down and burn them from the sky. Everyone's just going crazy and turning against each other, which is not only seen in the kingdom, but also in more subtle moments like Gwaine pulling his sword. Basically what the actor's gone through on Instagram, because there's actual morons out there who don't understand that an actor isn't the character they play.
Okay, they're talking about fictional characters. Fictional characters.
I think in the end though, he realises how doomed they are and knows they're powerless in this war. It's a death march with Cole nihilistically saying that all men might be corrupt. This goes through every aspect of society, and he sees it as eventually leading to annihilation. However, in this he'll finally have the relief of death, and had he died when he originally intended to in season 1, or even before that, then he wouldn't have had to go through this all. Anyway, after Tylan wins his mud bath, we then have a little cannibal joke, which you know we love at the channel. We then cut to King Pout and Baela. She ends up comforting him over his anger for the commoners, which have now been brought up to him, which makes him feel lower. The pair are betrothed, and they're sort of stuck in the same boat. They've been forced into this situation by their parents, and due to them being bastards, Jace feels unworthy. However, as she explains, he's not the first person in a position of power like this, and yeah, it's a great way to take the character. After seeing Rhaenyra out in the Vale shivering, we also see how desperate she is to prove her worth. I know I'm just kind of going to lump these all together later in the video, but there's a great moment where she rushes out to get water, and you can see a smoking rock beside her. There's a dragon nearby. Either way, her having to do this, all this stuff with Jace, it's all because their parents are putting pressure on them. It aligns with a lot of children in the series who want nothing more than to live up to their parents' expectations. Alicent only ever went to Viserys because Otto told her to, and Rhaenyra also didn't want to become the heir. We have the theme of children continuing to be put in peril, with Rhaenyra and Alicent not learning from what happened. Alicent puts her own son on the chopping block at the end, and it's sad because none of the kids really wanted this. Across with Tylan, we also get a great feast in which Shirako proposes to have his children. Now, Shirako is a man in the book, and they kind of play with gender a lot in the episode. Just keeps you guessing what way the conversation's gonna go, and yeah, the banquet's then mirrored on Dragonstone. Tylan toasts here, and we see as Rhaenyra throws a toast for the Dragon Riders. This has her, Baylor, Jace, Ulf, Hugh, and also Adam. It's a far cry from what some of the characters have gone through, with Ulf lustfully wondering about the feasts in the Red Keep whilst he was in the Cock Inn. Hugh also beat someone up in the street to steal some carrots, so for them, this is like that feeling that you get when you hit the thumbs up. This scene is very much a Last Supper situation in which the riders are all potentially getting the last good meal they'll have before they go to war. This Last Supper is something we also saw in season 1 with Viserys holding a banquet right before his death. There, all of the family was pulled together, and it seemed like they put their differences to the side. They came from all walks of life and all sides of the family, with them being made up of trueborns and very strong bastards. Dear me. Here it's the same thing, with all these being related in some way or another. They're Targaryen or Velaryon, and yeah, it's a nice way to build up that moment. The supper in season 1 was the last time the family were together before it all kicked off, and I feel like that's the same sort of thing here. The Last Supper is of course symbolic in a number of ways, with Christianity being heavily steeped in it. A mural for that was also created by Leonardo da Vinci, with it being adapted into pop culture in lots of different ways. Things like Watchmen, the promo art for shows like Lost, The Sopranos, and so on and so forth. Typically, its usage denotes the gathering of key figures before a great event, and everyone's getting ready for season 3 in 2026. Can't wait. Now, one thing that you guys cleared up for us last week was Hugh Hammer's parentage. It's now been confirmed that his mother was Sarah Targaryen, the daughter of Jaehaerys. Known as a rebel, it's said in the work that her first word was no.
My name is No.
It said that she started drinking before 11, like 11 years old, not the time 11, which we all know. Everyone likes to drink before 11. But either way, she was involved in a big scandal in the Red Keep. She admitted to kissing girls and also sleeping with 3 of her male friends. These were locked up, and later she was forced to watch as one of them was killed by her father in combat. During this time, she also fled to the dragon pit to try and escape on one of the winged beasts. Now this adds a touch of irony to the show. She wanted to claim a dragon to escape the life of a rich highborn, which failed. Hugh, on the other hand, grew up in poverty, and he claimed a dragon to ascend to the life of a highborn. Now we know that Sarah eventually was sent to Old Town to serve with the Silent Sisters. She escaped to then go and work in a brothel in Belantis, where, as we learned, she was well sought after. When Jaehaerys put out the call to settle his succession, she refused to step forward and said she held her own kingdom there. 3 people did come forward though and claimed to be her bastard sons, though this was never proven. Jaehaerys went to his deathbed regretting what had happened to her, and in the work, he even mistook Alicent for her. Like, maybe on your deathbed, guys, just stop saying names, yeah? Just stop saying names if you're on your deathbed. Either way, his grandson getting accepted back in means a lot, and it also explains why Vermithor chose him. I do feel like dragons tend to recognize bloodlines and gravitate towards them as riders. For example, Seasmoke's previous rider was Laenor, so it makes sense he'd go after his half-brother. Jaehaerys greatly cared about Sarah, so it makes sense his dragon would go to Hugh. Has to be said though that there's not really rules to this, and that Hugh may have been chosen because he bravely saved that woman. Ulf and Adam were cowardly though, so yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it is. Either way, it brings things full circle, and it's a nice way to bring Hugh into the fold. Now, throughout the episode, we constantly see the arrogance of Ulf, which is exemplified in the scene at the painted table and here at the banquet. Demanding more wine and food, he's living it up in the city. He of course would brag and boast at the Cock Inn, but now it's all coming true and it's gone to his head. It's basically a form of wish fulfillment in which everything he's ever wanted is now at his fingertips. Guy can even become a knight, which is a massive thing for the character. Hugh and Adam take it more seriously, but we see Jace and Baylor glancing back and forth. It's all kind of commenting on the class war and how Jay sees himself as being above them. However, when you get down to it, he's a bastard as well, who's only in this position because his mother happened to be the heir. All the dragon seeds are as closely linked to the family as he is, but it was their fathers that slept with common mothers. Because his dad slept with Rhaenyra, he's been given the titles they haven't. So it's an interesting thing to add to the character, and it shows that they're not as different as you'd think. I think that's the whole point of the series, with it showing how those in power think themselves above others. However, we've seen how the dragons aren't gods and the Targaryens aren't as special as they'd have people believe. Across the board, they're leading everyone to ruin, killing kids, not hitting the thumbs up, and causing nothing but issues. All because they couldn't work things out, and yeah, I can see things from both sides, you could say. Now, Rhaenyra brings up how having dragons could be deterrent enough, which is of course akin to things like the Cold War. Atomic weapons being out there means that a lot of countries have them, but because of this, they also don't want to use them. There's the chance chance the other side could fight back, so people tend to be afraid of escalating things at that point. Rhaenyra thinks that they need to strike fast though, but this causes issues with some at the table. Much in the same way Helena refuses to kill innocents, we see how that's a point of contention here as well. Ulf is the only one who doesn't seem to hesitate, and Adam rightly calls him a coward. Again, it ties back to what happened with his dragon, and it was more the dragon choosing him than him being brave and claiming her. He ran off from the dragon pit, and yeah, the guy's a coward, mate. Already, though, tensions are starting to flare with Ulf, and we'll talk in the spoiler section what this eventually leads to. We then end with a message coming from Harrenhal, and yeah, things close out with it being quite uneasy.
There is a message from Harrenhal, Your Grace.
As we learn, Sir Simon fears treachery, and he's seen Daemon constantly calling himself king and going off on these mental trips. Which is what we get next when we cut back to Harrenhal. Almost like a sleep paralysis demon, Alice sits on his bed waiting for him to awaken. The pair then travel out of the God's Wood, where he sees a mysterious creature. It's difficult to make out exactly what this is, but it appears goat-like and almost satanic. It may potentially be a faun or even a satyr, and the latter of which is something that we mentioned last week in relation to the black goat. Black goats are thought to be occult omens, with the devil being said to shapeshift into them during medieval times. This was shown in movies like The Witch, and even figures like Baphomet are based around them. However, the horns are more like antlers, so I'm not putting all my chips on that. What it might also be is in relation to the Children of the Forest, who we know also hung around the weirwood trees. Our editor Matt said it could be one of the Green Men, and according to the wiki, the Green Men are a sacred order entrusted with the guardianship of the Isle of Faces in the Riverlands. Some nursery tales claim they are horned and have dark green skin. According to Old Nan, the Green Men ride elks and sometimes have antlers. Most maesters believe their clothes are green and they wear headdresses with horns. So that seems right, and we know from the work that the Green Men appear at one point during Fire and Blood. It's one of those things I'd love to hear your thoughts on though, because you don't get a proper look at them, and make sure you drop all your theories below. Now at this point, we get a big scene that I think everyone's going to be talking about when it comes to this episode. Alice tells Daemon that he's ready to touch the weirwood tree, and we see he gets piled with the mega compilation trailer for Game of Thrones seasons 1 to 8. Weirwood trees are known for their mystical qualities, and they're abundant throughout the land. When the dragons fly over Harrenhal in the wide shot, we can see an island full of them. We know that Daemon's bed was made out of one as well, so it makes sense he'd keep having these visions in the night. Weirwood trees are seen as somewhere where you take oaths, and that's why the houses gathered there and why people like Jon Snow took the black in front of one. They're very sacred, and beyond that, we also have some behind-the-scenes shots of it, and know they hid a little Easter egg in the face. That belongs to George R.R. Martin, who is of course the author of the work. Now upon touching it, the first vision he gets is Brynden Rivers, aka the Three-Eyed Raven. We see this bird flying out from him and draw close attention to his birthmark. This is so we can confirm that it's the character, and he appeared quite heavily throughout the main series, but there was a bit of backlash because he had 2 eyes. Still seems like they messed him up because the guy's got 2 eyes again, but I'm guessing they had to do it to keep it consistent with the main show. I know people kind of go back and forth over whether that's even the real Three-Eyed Raven, but we're not going to get into. We'll not get into that. Now, Brynden was the bastard son of King Aegon IV, who was a Targaryen loyalist during the Blackfire Rebellion. I believe that we may see this at one point in the vision where Daemon steps over the corpses. It might not be, and I kind of feel like this is setting up the Duncan Egg series, which is coming next year, and I'd love to hear all your theories on that. Brynden, of course, has the powers of the Three-Eyed Raven, though, so he could be seeing Daemon right now as Daemon's seeing him. From here, we then cut to the north and see the Marching of the Dead led by a White Walker. You'll likely recognize him from the main show, and he's here to highlight winter's coming. The Song of Ice and Fire has been heavily hinted at throughout the seasons, with this further cementing that notion. We then cut to a dead dragon, and it's a bit difficult to make out exactly who this is. It could be the one from the aftermath of the Gay Bannon, which is something I'll talk about later on in the video. If you have your own ideas for it though, they're probably right, but drop them below, as I'd love to read them and steal them for when I do a Daemon stream breakdown video. Now we then have Daemon falling into water where he seems to be drowning. This is likely the God's Eye, which is another thing I want to touch upon at the end. It kind of ties into what Helena says to Aemon on the balcony, and we have 2 prophets mirroring each other, speaking to mirrors of each other. Daemon reflects Aemon, and vice versa, with Helena and Alice telling them the future. Lastly, we then have Dany's eggs, which I feel are going to be tied in with what Rhaena took to the Vale. As we know, 1 hatched, and this leaves the 3 remaining. The director of the show said these were the same eggs, but then the showrunner shot it down. I feel like that was either them doing damage control and trying to save some surprises, or they aren't linked at all. Personally, I think they are, and not much of a surprise because the whole thing got leaked on TikTok earlier in the week. I feel like the HBO security is these guys. You can also catch a comet in the sky, which is often seen as either a good or bad omen. In the War of the Five Kings, it was thought to signal victory, whereas it's also been thought to signify bloodshed. Daenerys saw this and thought that it signified she should go into the Red Waste, and yeah, there's lots of symbolism that comes from this comet. Now we then end with a shot of Dany's back with her dragons crawling over her. This comes from the end of the first season and the aftermath of the burning. It was suspected that she was dead, however, she rose from the ashes with these 3 new beasts. This then set off a chain of events in which she'd storm King's Landing and then seize the throne. Didn't rule for too long, but this idea of a woman leading is then given to us in the next moment. We see Rhaenyra sat on the throne, foreshadowing what could come when she sacks King's Landing herself. This scene is of course very similar to when Aemon stood and looked at the throne earlier in the season. There Helena came to him, and that's something that happens here. Again, it's tying these 2 characters together, and Helena says he's a small part in a greater story. She says he knows his part now, and finally the character knows what he needs to do. Finally, please no more visions! Aemon goes out to his sister on the balcony overlooking the Red Keep. This is of course where Rhaenyra and Aemon went to back in Season 1 Episode 4. There, they used the passages in the Red Keep that was secretly built by Maegor the Cruel. Blood and Cheese also used them as well, with them being something that destroyed Helena's life. Daemon and Rhaenyra ended up getting it on, and yeah, this brother and sister thing, You never know with a Targaryen. Now, he tries to give her the idea that the burden of a true cause lies on them, which Alicent doesn't understand. She can't ride a dragon, and it builds off the theme of the upper class that's rampant throughout the episode. Now, he wants to travel to Harrenhal and attack it. This is something Aegon the Conqueror did alongside his sisters, and it's sort of history repeating itself. Except for one thing, Helena won't do it. She tells Aemon that she saw he burned Aegon and tells him that he will rule again and that Aemon will die at the God's Eye. Where's the bloody spoiler alert, love? Dear me. But no, this of course mirrors the scene with Alice in which she told Daemon at the God's Eye that he was going to die there. We have these 2 scenes that build off the back of each other, and I'll go more in depth on this later on in the video. And I will give you a spoiler warning, mate, not like that bloody Helena. Now though the Greens are vastly outmatched in terms of dragons, what the Blacks don't have is a dragon dreamer. Helena's ability to see the future is something that wasn't in the book, but I feel like it's going to be a useful tool in Season 3. The Targaryens had members in the household that were prophets, and this helped them to avert catastrophe. Daenerys the Dreamer predicted doom, and thus the Targaryens missed the fall of old Valyria. Aegon saw the coming of the Night King, and Viserys saw a son sat on the Iron Throne. Helena has predicted a multitude of things which we've broken down in a standalone video. Again, this is brand new for the series, and I feel like it's going to be a big thing going forth. If Helena can predict what way a battle's going to go, then there may be a chance to avoid a loss. This could have potentially saved Meleys from ruining the coronation, and also the events of Blood and Cheese if people had have listened to her. I have an upcoming video about my Season 3 predictions where I'll talk about how I think this need for prophecy ties in with another character. You also have her mentioning that Aegon will sit on a wooden throne, which is something he has to do because he can't walk up to the iron one. I think that this might lead into a scene similar to Viserys trying to climb up the steps, but Aegon won't have anyone to help him. Now, if you want to support the channel, then definitely check out our merch store right below the video. We've got 3 House of the Dragon inspired shirts on there, and you can show your allegiances to either the Greens or Blacks. We've also launched some new Theory Time hoodies. I will be dropping more clothes like this as we head towards the end of the year. What do you mean you don't want them? Well, we'll put out a poll, mate, and that was the winner. So, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, cheers for all your support. Much love. Now, at this point, Rhaenyra flies out to Harrenhal. Poor Caraxes, just waiting there for something to happen. And yeah, same here, mate. Same here. Swooping down on the troops though, they're rightly terrified, as not only do they not know what side the dragon's on, but they've also heard of the previous battles and massacres. It really shows how even when you've amassed an army, how if there's a dragon, then it's pointless fighting, which highlights the entire folly of the war. Should really just be dragon versus dragon, but they keep hammering home how many innocents will needlessly die who don't stand a chance anyway. I love that shot of Cyrax swooping down over the hall, and yeah, pointless fighting. All the men-at-arms are sworn to Daemon, and in the end, Daemon swears to Rhaenyra. He knows that winter's coming, and knows they have to stand together in order to stand a chance. Rhaenyra is the only hope, and Viserys chose her to be the shepherd to pass along the message for when things finally go down. As we know, it all falls apart, but it shows how much Daemon's been shaken by the vision. So Alfred doesn't look too happy, and you might notice that he walks off through the crowd. In the end though, it's a triumphant moment for Rhaenyra in which she sees how people really believe in her. Also, love the little joke about how he's tried to leave her but couldn't do it, and a great little joke, mate. Great little joke, especially when you nearly committed treason and almost destroyed everything. Great joke. Ha Anyway, from here we cut to the Queen Who Never Was, which is dismounted and then made ready to sail. Joined at his side by Alan, Corlys shows that he cares, and though it doesn't go well, he tries to help in his own way. Alan stands up to him for once and basically tells him how hard it's been being abandoned by their dad. Both he and Adam had it terrible, and for as quiet as Alan's been all season, he's finally unleashing. Such a good scene, especially since the character's been relegated to being silent all season, and yet, what a way to unload. Now, I love the dynamic and character growth that they've done with Corlys throughout the show. In Season 1, he argued with Rhaenys that history didn't remember blood, it just remembered names. Thus, he was willing to accept bastards and give them titles and make them his heirs. However, I think the more he's lost, the more he's realised how much folly there lies in that. Saying folly because I'm proper into Game of Thrones. Laena, his daughter, was killed, which was the first in a long line of deaths for the character. Laenor apparently died, leaving the lineage of that in the air, and we then had Luke dying with him being the next dead at Driftmark. His brother's also dead as well, and we have his wife who died at the Battle of Rook's Rest, so he's lost her and seemingly all of his children. However, Adam and Alan are of course also his sons, so I think he sees them as a way to redeem the past. He clearly carries some of the guilt over forcing them to live in poverty and not accepting them into the family. Now he has a second chance to try and make things right, which is a really interesting way to take the character. Whether he manages to do it or not is something we'll see, but this scene makes me think that he might try and do it at some point. Anyway, after another little scene with Rhaena, we join Rhaenyra and Mysaria looking over the bay, which is something a pair have done throughout the season. The latter is patting her on the back for getting more dragon riders, and she says it's because the gods favor her. Rhaenyra knows that if she strikes, she dooms thousands to their deaths, and we know she's constantly going back and forth. This all culminates at the end of the episode, but she does admit that it's not what her dad would have wanted. Asking who pays the price, we know in the end that it's going to be the small folk, and yeah, you can see that she's feeling very guilty. Now over the sea we can catch dragons tumbling through the air, which is very symbolic. This is showing the Dance of the Dragons, which isn't as nice as it sounds. The Dance of the Dragons is the flowery name bestowed upon the savage internecine struggle for the Iron Throne of Westeros fought between two rival branches of House Targaryen during the years 129 to 131 AC. Don't know why I had to look at the camera there to read that word I didn't understand there, but we're definitely reading from the book. To characterize the dark, turbulent, bloody doings of this period as a dance strikes us as grotesquely inappropriate. No doubt the phrase originated with some singer. The dying of the dragons would be altogether more fitting. But tradition, time, and Grand Maester Munkin have burned the more poetic usage into the pages of history. So we must dance along with the rest. So though it looks beautiful, it's highlighting how messed up things are about to get. Kristen of course also mentions it by name, and this term in general means war. So having these doing it, though nice to look at on the surface, also has a darker layer to it. Now from here we cut to Rhaenyra in bed where she's awakened and taken down the stairs. It's shot in a similar way to what happened with the Dragon Keepers last week, with us following her down. There they stood up to her and left without working things out, and it's sort of a similar thing here. Now this is of course a flip on the meeting at the Sept, with Alicent now going out to her instead. Me, I'd have just beheaded her there, mate. However, I think Rhaenyra rightfully knows that Alicent means nothing in the war at this point. Killing her won't stop Aemond, and she's not on the council either. Alicent talks about how she used to believe there was an order, and brings up how Rhaenyra didn't. This ties back to their first scene where the former was ripping out pages from books whilst Alicent studied. As mentioned earlier, she's lost her faith, but says this extends to every person in her life. The baptism at the lake has really changed her, and she says she wants to be free from the Game of Thrones. All the plotting, backstabbing, it's got too much, and being isolated has made her see the truth. She just wants to take her daughter and grandchild and leave. In the end, she wants to be absolved, which Rhaenyra mocks. We catch Alison biting her nails as well, which is a characteristic she had when she was younger. This highlighted her anxiety, and she was constantly picking away at them. It's such a good character detail, and she then says how Viserys never stopped loving Aemma. This explains why he kept Rhaenyra as the heir, and Alison says that if Rhaenyra attacks King's Landing, then Alison will let her in. She's betraying her son in order to avoid more death, but there are ulterior motives. Alicent wants Aegon to be spared, but it's not something Rhaenyra will agree to. We ended season 1 with her learning she'd lost her son, and she feels like Alicent has to give up hers to make things right. Beyond this in the book, Rhaenyra also blamed Alicent for her miscarriage, with the news of Aegon's usurping adding more stress to the labour. He has to be publicly executed, and yet, unfortunately, the sides can't agree. Now, it shows a massive change in Rhaenyra, as she hated the fact that baby Jaehaerys was killed. She saw some kinship in Helaena, but won't spare Alicent of the pain that she herself has gone through. It's a sad way to end things, and ultimately Rhaenyra chooses more death and the destruction of thousands of innocents. Yay, the best queen ever! I think ultimately though, Rhaenyra believes that she doesn't have a choice. She sees this as being as a burden now, and no matter how much she may want to stop it, she knows it's too late. If things had stopped at the Sept, there may have been a chance though. She asks Alicent if she'll make the sacrifice and says a son for a son. It is of course the title of the chapter in the work and the name of the first episode this season. This notion of a son for a son is of course based off an eye for an eye, and as we've seen, it just leads to the need for more vengeance. It's not really going to make much of a difference though, because Aegon's out the fight. To me, it's kind of petty for Rey to do this, and it's showing how the crown crushes all who wear it. Great quote by Viserys. It of course also builds off the back of Blood and Cheese, where Helaena had to choose which child had to die. In the work, they didn't really play it like that, and she actually had to pick between her two sons. Blood and Cheese then killed the one she chose to save, but in the end it was still, choose your son. Either way, it's a devastating thing to force a mother to do, but Alicent's ready to give up everything she's fought for in the end. In the end, it reflects the opening of season 1 as Alicent puts forth a son to die. Alicent says she promises to open the keep, and Rhaenyra says that history won't remember her well. She calls her the Cold Queen, and we know from the work that she wasn't well liked. Alicent then offers her the chance to come with her, and yeah, I think the whole thing about being in love and the fan theories, it might have some weight. Ultimately though, she turns her down, and Aegon will of course not be in the kingdom when things kick off, and Alicent may still be seen as a liar. Now we end the episode with war still not being averted, and it now being the only path forward. To a lovely sad piano soundtrack, we see Rhaenyra standing in front of the dragon Meraxes. This skull is something she's looked at a lot throughout the season, and it was a dragon that was killed in combat. This eerily ties in with the death of another character who we'll talk more about in the spoiler section. I do think her being here though is very important, as it highlights both Dragon and the Targaryens are in danger. Alicent heads out, and Hugh, Adam and Ulf are then adorned in armor. Ulf seems to be the only one happy about it, with it highlighting he's not taking the war seriously. We also catch Rhaena running through the Vale. Now, Rhaena conquering Sheepstealer is a big change up from the book, with her dragon originally being called Morning. This was the small hatchling that accompanied them to the Vale, which we likely saw during the events of episode 6. That leaves 3 dragon eggs remaining from the ones that she originally took from Dragonstone. Either way, Nettles was the one who conquered Sheepstealer in the book, with her being described as foul-mouthed, filthy and fearless. We have been over the character and read passages out from the work describing her, but I know that it does some of your heads in, so I'll not repeat it every single week. The cliff notes are though that she was a bastard of uncertain birth who grew up homeless in Spice Town in Hull. Having to steal in order to survive, her nose was slit after she was caught during one of her risky maneuvers. Hearing of the call for Dragon Seed, she went out to Dragonstone and would take Sheeps to Sheepstealer every day until the pair eventually bonded. In the work, Sheepstealer is described as Sheepstealer, a notably ugly mud-brown dragon hatched when the old king was still young. Had a taste for mutton, swooping down on shepherds' flocks from Driftmark to the Wendwater. He seldom harmed the shepherds, unless they attempted to interfere with him, but had been known to devour the occasional sheepdog. So they've taken elements of her character and put them into Rhaena, but it's likely they're going in a drastically different direction overall. I'll save that for the spoiler section again, you know it by now. But but it will spoil stuff, so we'll leave it for that. We also see the Hightower forces marching out and can catch Daeron and his dragon flying overhead. Now Daeron has been teased throughout the season with him being up in Old Town. Deemed the most popular of Alicent's children, he's also described in the work as being kind and courteous. I have gone in depth on the character and the breakdown, so I don't just want to repeat that, but we know he was sent to his uncle at age 10. Growing up in humble surroundings, he saw the strongest being people that were going to take away his birthright. We know that he got his dragon at age 6, with Tessarion being nicknamed the Blue Queen. Described as looking cobalt and copper, this modestly sized dragon was known for its speed and cunning. At this point, we see the Starks crossing the Twins, which was open to them due to Jace's negotiations. These were of course a major thing in the main series, with these being where the Red Wedding went down. Ironically, that had the Starks versus Lannisters, with those two other families now marching against each other. The Lannisters would claim a great victory through using it down the line, and it's sort of like poetry they rhyme. Having this location seized is now of course a major turning point in both wars. This was one of the only crossings at the Green Fork, with armies having to march hundreds of miles in either direction to find another point to cross. Originally set up as a wooden bridge, the phrase ran tolls which netted them a fortune over the centuries. Standing for roughly 500 years at this point in the timeline, it's now been developed into a strong fortitude that makes it almost impenetrable. The Starks being here is also worrying for the Greens, as originally they weren't thought to be much of a problem. The work said the North was too remote to be much import in the fight, the council judged. By the time the Starks gathered their banners and marched south, the war might well be over. However, beyond that, we can also see the soldiers are all elderly men. If you cast your mind back to episode 1 in the season, you might remember that Cregan promised greybeards. This is a term for an elderly man, so it's a nice bit of attention to detail to have these guys here. From here, we then join the Lannister army, who are now alongside House Lefford. Lefford was who we saw at Golden Tooth, with them now accompanying the army. The Lannister sigil is a golden lion, and you can see these in the cages behind them. The book talks about this entire plan, with it saying, here he proposed to strike the Riverlands from both east and west, and thus force the Lords of the Trident to fight on two fronts at once. Jason Lannister had assembled a formidable host in the Western Hills, 1,000 armored knights, and 7 times as many archers and men-at-arms. Let him descend from the high ground and cross the Red Fork with fire and sword, while Sir Criston Cole marched forth from King's Landing, accompanied by Prince Aemon himself on Vhagar. The two armies would converge on Harrenhal to crush the traitors of the Trident between them, and if his uncle emerged from behind the castle walls to oppose them, as he surely must, Vhagar would overcome Caraxes, and Prince Aemon would return to the city with Prince Daemon's head. We can see Harrenhal in the Fork, with the Battle of the Red Fork becoming something major down the line. Daemon's army is of course a massive thing, and we're then shown him with his armor going towards all of his people that he now has. Finally, we also have the fleet out at sea, with a triarchy coming together. This will be to capture the Gay Bannon, which is currently carrying 2 Targaryen princes. Children are in peril once more, and yeah, some slow motion, epic montage to let us know what's coming. Corlys and Alan are also there as well, with it highlighting a major upcoming naval battle. Though Alan looks at him like he's doing his duty, but he doesn't want to father, again, I think we will see them coming together. Lastly, we end with Otto in a cage, which is mirrored in Aegon and Larys being escorted away from King's Landing. Otto's fate is a bit ambiguous, and I'd love to hear what you think's going on with him. We do know from the work exactly what happens with him down the line, but I'm gonna save that for the spoiler section. Alicent then looks over the bay, with us getting mirrored shots of her and Rhaenyra. The final shots of the pair both framed in the exact same spot camera-wise, however Alicent's looking over the water and sky. This represents the freedom that she's now got by stepping away from everything. Selfishly, she's doomed her family, but it's meant she can step away and be alone. On the opposite side of this, Rhaenyra is shot so she's surrounded by scrolls that document her family's history and lineage. They represent a trap which she's now stuck in, with her being in the center at the bottom. The scrolls seem like they sprawl out from her like a family tree, but they also represent the burden she still carries. In staying there and accepting her duty, she's doomed herself to be stuck in this game. It's a really symbolic way to end the entry, and sadly it highlights she'll never escape the Game of Thrones.
He said it! He said it!
Now, as for the spoiler section, we have a lot to talk about in terms of what's coming in the future. 2 years from now, we'll see what they use from this, and I bet by then you can't remember it anyway, so keep watching. However, spoiler warning for that, so if you think you might remember or you don't want it ruined, then I recommend you turn off now. Huge thank you for watching up until this point, and hopefully I'll see you again in 2 years' time. Or Night of the Seven Kingdoms, when that comes. There's some bits that tease that. Yay! Now let me know in the comments if you're from then as well, and also let me know what happened to the world. Anyway, first major thing I want to talk about is the storming of King's Landing. Rhaenyra ends up taking charge of the Red Keep once more, and I think this is going to be the main thing that happens next time. She does this while Aemon and Cole are out at Harrenhal, and it seems like Alicent might even open the doors for her. Even if she doesn't know, she still told Rhaenyra about the city being defenseless, so I can see it not mattering either way. We know in the work that Aegon was gone when they arrived, so it's not like her pleading he was spared really makes a difference. It would help down the line, but someone who's captured and held is Helaena. In the end, she throws herself from the Red Keep and falls to her death. Now looking at her and Aemon looking over the balcony, I think this is the location where she's going to do it from. The work says that she was held in Maegor's holdfast, and after her son Maelor was killed, that his head was sent to her in a chamber pot. This was apparently done to mock her, as a chamber pot's something that people do their business in. Some thought this was done by Rhaenyra, who apparently laughed away as she sent it off, or at least ordered it, but I don't think this is something that they'll touch on in the show. She's shown some kinship with Helaena in the past, namely episode 2, where she was sympathetic that they were both mothers to murdered boys. Helaena then leapt from the room window and died after being impaled on the spikes below. Now there were rumours that she was murdered, but it's a massive thing in the kingdom. Due to Alicent's comments about wanting to save her, but Helaena refusing to go, ultimately we know that it's going to lead to this. Now the thing with Rhaena and Nettles that's drastically different is that Nettles ends up hooking up with Daemon. Daemon practically leaves Rhaenyra to be with her, but Rhaena is of course his daughter. I can't see them going down that route for the TV show, and instead I think they've shown his disloyalty through other means. His entire arc this season with all the visions has been about him questioning himself and what he really wants. He's basically been telling people he's the king, but in the end he bends the knee to Rhaenyra. Still though, that would be treason to some, but put the pitchforks away, mate. It's obviously not too dissimilar to what the Greens were doing with Aegon, it's just that Daemon happens to be fighting them. So yeah, him bending the knee makes me feel we will skip over that stuff with him falling in love with Nettles while Rhaena, but in case I don't, I thought I'd share that in the spoiler section. Either way, when Daemon quote-unquote dies, we know that his body's never found. This happens at the God's Eye, and it comes when he's been fighting Aemond. This links back to the vision from before, and also what Helaena said to her brother. We know that Daemon went to the weirwood tree in the courtyard and slashed away at it, waiting for the character to arrive. Him having this vision here adds credence to why he went to it, and both dragons tussle in the air. He then leapt from Caraxes and stabbed Aemon through the eye before all four fell into the God's Eye. The work doesn't really confirm whether he's alive or dead, and he's never brought up again. Some think that he ended up fleeing Westeros, and someone else who was never spotted again was Nettles, or her dragon. In the work, I always felt like the pair had run away together, but I doubt that's going to be something they do in the show, especially because Rhaena's his daughter. Now, getting this makeshift navy is extremely important, as it's what really brings a change in the war. We know that the Triarchy fleet sees the Gay Abannon, and this has them capturing the princes. Yet the plans of men are but playthings to the gods. But even as Jace laid his plans, a new threat was coming from the east. The schemes of Otto Hightower had borne fruit. Meeting in Tyrosh, the High Council of the Triarchy had accepted his offer of alliance. 90 warships swept from the stepstones under the banners of the Three Daughters, bending their oars for the gullet. And as chance would have it, the Pentoshi cog, the Gay Abannon, carrying 2 Targaryen princes, sailed straight into their teeth. Now we then learned the escorts sent to protect the cog were sunk or taken. The Gay Abannon captured. The tale reached Dragonstone only when Prince Aegon arrived, desperately clinging to the neck of his dragon Stormcloud. The boy was white with terror, Mushroom tells us, shaking like a leaf and stinking of piss. Only 9, he had never flown before and would never fly again. For Stormcloud had been terribly wounded as he fled the Gay Abannon, arriving with the stubs of countless arrows embedded in his belly and a scorpion bolt through his neck. He died within the hour, hissing as hot blood gushed black smoking from his wounds. Now Prince Viserys unfortunately only had an egg on the boat, so he wasn't able to ride away on a dragon. That's not an egg on pun. So he disguised himself as one of the boys on the ship, but he was caught and then snitched on by another shipmate. Anyway, we have the Battle of the Gullet right around the corner, which I think is going to be something early on in the next season. This comes in the aftermath of the Gay Abannon, and it sees one of the biggest battles in the war. Now it seems like they might be giving Otto's arc to Tywin, and I feel like Otto may be beheaded soon. He was killed during the war, and I do wonder if that's the way they're going to go. Anyway, after Prince Aegon arrived on Dragonstone and he brought word of what had happened, it all kicked off. The Triarchy ships entered the gullet, which is where they surprised the Valorian fleet. Riding to their aid, Jace leapt into action on the back of Vermax. Ulf and Hammer joined him, along with Nettles, which again will likely be Rhaena in the show. However, the Triarchy had up their weapons to fight dragons, and they managed to take Vermax down. In the book, it said he was shot through the eye, which is similar to Meraxes. However, the accounts in the work say this may not have been the case. Several differing tales were told afterwards of how and why the dragon fell. Some claimed a crossbowman put an iron bolt through his eye, but this version seems suspiciously similar to the way Meraxes met her end, long ago in Dawn. Another account tells us that a sailor in the crow's nest of the Myrish Gallery cast a grapnel as Vermax was swooping through the fleet. One of its prongs found purchase between the two scales and was driven deep by the dragon's own considerable speed. The sailor had coiled his end of the chain about the mast, and the weight of the ship and the power of Vermax's wings tore a long jagged gash in the dragon's belly. The dragon's shriek of rage was heard as far off as Spicetown, even through the clangor of battle. His flight jerked to a violent end. Vermax went down smoking and screaming, clawing the water. Survivors said he struggled to rise, only to crash headlong into a burning galley. Wood splintered, the mast came tumbling down, and the dragon, thrashing, became entangled in the rigging. When the ship heeled over and sank, Vermax sank with her. Crashing into the sea, Jace jumped from his back and tried to clutch onto a boat. However, he was shot and killed by archers who were aligned along the ships. I feel this is why Rhaenyra keeps looking at the dragon Meraxes, and we end with her once more at it because I think it's foreshadowing the death of her son. So I think that's going to be a major part of the opening of Season 3, and I actually think it'll affect both Ulf and Hugh quite heavily. The pair end up defecting to the Greens, and they may use this battle as a way to convince them their side isn't that invincible. To be honest, the way people are speaking to Ulf, he's kind of going to go off anyway, I feel, because the guy he's just pushing all the wrong buttons. Rhaenyra might even blame him for her son's death, and yeah, I can see why he'd end up switching sides. Hugh, no idea yet. To be honest though, we kind of need people to go turncoat, otherwise the war's going to be very one-sided. The Greens have Vhagar, Tessarion, Dreamfire and Sunfire. The last two aren't really operational at this point, and though Sunfire comes back, the Blacks have an easy win. Now, another thing that rocks the Blacks is the King's Landing riots, which may have been set up by what happened to a character in episode 6. There we saw as someone had their arm cut off, and it's possible that this is the Shepherd. In case you don't know, this is a character who only had one hand who stirred civil unrest in the city. Claiming that dragons were demons, he stoked a religious fever. I do wonder if the Dragon Keepers from the last episode will be seen in the Dragon Pit here, and this will bring things full circle from that. I'm guessing that if they can't be at home in Dragonstone, they'll leave for the Dragon Pit at King's Landing, and it could all be building out from that. Lastly, Rhaenyra is killed when she's caught by Aegon and his crew, and had she spared him here, that never would have happened. Might not be something you do in the show, but yeah, it's interesting here how her fate could have been avoided. Now, as for my thoughts on the season, I think that it's been a bit of a weird one. It kind of feels like a season of two halves, with the latter part kind of dragging down the first half. When I tend to write my feelings up on a season as a whole, I go back and look through the past episodes and try and remember how they made me feel. I think though Blood and Cheese was disappointing from what I'd built up in my head from the book, that overall the first was a really good episode. Episode 2 then had the Cargyle twins, which I thought was a great entry as well. 3 was our first episode at Harrenhal, with it also doing a great job of painting it out like a haunted castle. We then had Rhaenyra going to King's Landing to speak with Alicent before Ford took us to the Battle of Rook's Rest. Yay! So I felt like the first half of the season was really solid, and there was a strong narrative week to week and back to back. However, it's from this point that things kind of took a turn and we got into some of the plotting. We then started getting Daemon's visions, which at first I thought were really cool. However, it's sort of been the same gimmick every week, with a character being hit over the head with the same lesson. I think when I look back at the season, I'll remember that quite a lot and how much it held up the character development. I feel like a lot of that could have been handled in 1 or 2 episodes instead of the multitude of them that we got. I think that's the case with the Dragon Seeds as well, and I felt pacing wise that the latter part of the season was a bit all over the place. There were obviously high moments like the Dragon Pit and some of the stuff at King's Landing with Aemon and Aegon, and though I sound like I'm bashing it, I still think it was solid. Now, though I've hit you over the head with not liking Harrenhal, I think the perfect example that sums up my criticisms of the show are what's happened with Rhaena. In the book, The Conquering of Sheep Stealer, that takes place over a paragraph. However, here it's been spread out over 3 episodes. I think that could have easily all been put into one scene, and it's weird having these moments spread out across multiple entries. I can imagine, right, if you've just seen the show and not read the book, you keep forgetting about this character and what it is they're up to. Kind of spend like 3 minutes with them, then never see them again until the next week, and have no idea why they cut it up that way. The latter half kind of makes you forget about the earlier episodes though, and when looking back, they were really strong. So yeah, it's a weird season to judge because I don't think it was bad by any means. I think just tightening up certain bits would have made the show a lot more enjoyable, because I can see how things like the budget and season 3 ideas kind of held things back. I feel like if you were writing this with unlimited money without the promise of season 3, that you'd have put a lot more into it. You probably should have got the Battle of the Gullet, or at least the storming of King's Landing, but either they didn't have the money or just wanted to save it for next time, so they had something to tease us with. The series has of course gone from 10 episodes to 8, and I think if we'd had those extra 2, then the season would have been stronger because they would have been forced to include one of those 2 things. Now, in terms of acting, I actually think this is the best acted season out of the 2 by quite a bit. Episode 2 especially had a lot of stuff from Aegon, Otto, Rhaenyra and Daemon that really allowed the characters to be pushed. You also had the new blood coming into the show as well. Bringing in new characters can often be difficult, but I felt like the Dragon Seeds worked really well. In the book, they're kind of just like, here they are, mate. Whereas here, we learned about them beforehand. Seeing Ulf as a guy who talks rubbish and then having to basically step up was an interesting way to take him, and we had huge hardships with his family, leading to him feeling like a failure. He then had to step up to the mark, and it was a really interesting way to inject the characters into the show. So yeah, I've tried to give you a balanced review here on what I liked and what I didn't like so much. I think looking back, I enjoyed the season overall. I just have a couple of things here and there that I think got dragged to the point of hurting the show as a whole. Hopefully season 3 irons out this pacing, and I think if you know the book, then you'll know season 3 is going to be where a lot of the big stuff happens. Either way, your opinion is what I love to hear now, as I know you guys will have a lot to say. So make sure you drop them below, and huge thank you for all your support throughout the season. One of the main reasons I love covering the show, other than pretending to read from a book, is that you guys are so kind, informative, and full of knowledge and things I don't know. So you really bring a lot to the videos, and huge thank you for all your support throughout the season. It genuinely means a lot to me. Please drop a like as well, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please consider clicking the join button. For 99 cents a month, you'll get early access to videos, and it goes a massive way towards helping breakdowns like this get made. Huge thank you to everyone who's done it so far, and if you want to pick up some merch, that's right below the video. Now, if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown of Deadpool and Wolverine, which will be linked on screen right now. There's lots of things going on in that movie, lots of cameos, Easter eggs, and stuff to talk about, and yeah, if you've seen the film, then head over there after this. But out of the way, huge thank you for sticking through the video. I've been your...
Oh, nothing works on this acne.
Hi. Who? I'm a licensed dermatology provider from Curology. Answer a few questions, I'll look at your skin and prescribe you a personalized cream.
Wow!
Curology. Skincare with a face.
I'm gonna show you something that's gonna blow your mind.
Sexy.
Congratulations, you got this house. This is the last time I...
Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host, Paul, and finally, we have an almighty payoff for Daemon's visions. Throughout this video, we'll be breaking them down and discussing all the deeper meaning that they have for the show. This sets up not only things in Game of Thrones, but also the upcoming spin-off and Night of the Seven Kingdoms. In many ways, Daemon's visions mirror brands from the main show, and they confirm some theories and show what's to come. Spoiler alert, winter is coming.
Solar Arnazis.
Obviously, there's heavy spoilers ahead, so if you don't want it ruined, then I recommend you turn off now. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoy, and subscribe to the channel for videos like this every day. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Daemon's visions.
You know what you must do.
Now, whatever our opinions on Season 2 and how they handle Daemon's visions, I always knew it would lead to some major lore implications. The previous versions had him set up to fundamentally change who he is, from the sadistic and selfish rogue prince to someone who's willing to do what's best for the greater good. When he gets mugged off by the new Lord of the Riverlands, he sucks it up and does what he needs to do to get the armies he needs. Yeah, he finally accepts he's simply a player in this grander story, and he drops his main character syndrome. The House of the Dragon has lent into the story of Aegon's dream in a subtle way, and we've made a video discussing all about that and exactly what it means. Here he sees all that he exists in the context of all in which he lives, and all of what came before and what's about to come. Alice has been preparing Daemon all this time, and it hammers home how he's just a line in the Song of Ice and Fire when she gets him to touch the weirwood tree. Weirwood trees are known for their mystical qualities, and they've been rampant throughout the Riverlands. In the episode, we got a close look at them and have a little Easter egg from behind the scenes stuff. They actually have George R. Martin's face on them, which is a nice little detail. However, it shows how important this is, as the franchise creators embossed on this one. Now, before diving into the vision itself, I wanted to talk about the history of the trees and that creepy horned figure that Daemon saw behind one. I believe that I know what this is, and I believe it's one of the Green Men. During the ancient times, when the first men arrived in Westeros, they started burning and chopping down weirwood trees. This led to a war with the Children of the Forest, which in itself created the Night King. This war would end when they sort of pact with each other on the Isle of Faces, which is in the middle of the God's Eye. Faces were carved in the trees so the pact could be observed, and that's kind of a brief history of the weirwood trees. From here, an order known as the Green Men were charged with protecting the Isle of Faces. It's rumored that these Green Men have horns, green skin, or their horns are just headdresses. It's disputed amongst maesters, and Olnan mentioned them in the book. Now, it's unclear if this was indeed a real Green Man or just a spooky vision, but it's cool to see a nod to one of the best parts of the lore. You watch Game of Thrones for the boobs, mate. I watched it for the White Walker lore. We're not the same. Weirwood trees were cut down to make parts of Harrenhal, and it's been cursed ever since, with it even being thought blood was mixed in with the mortar. Daemon even says at one point the place will have you barking at the moon. Notably, Bran the Broken himself also touched a weirwood tree in Season 4 Episode 2, where he saw his father about to die. He then saw Castor's son being turned, the Iron Throne with snow like where Dany died, and is told where to find the three-eyed raven. Daemon's vision itself starts off with an almighty reveal, as we see a much younger version of the three-eyed raven in a much larger chamber than we saw him in during Season 4. The Raven here has a distinct birthmark, and from this we can more assume that the identity of the Raven is none other than Brynden Rivers. He was mentioned in the Lineages and Histories of the Great Houses of the Seven Kingdom book we saw throughout the season. In Game of Thrones, both Stu and Roger and Max von Sydow did not have the birthmark during their portrayal, but if we looked at the books, the description of the Raven, who was in the book called the Three-Eyed Crow, states that he had a blotch on his face as well as a missing eye. I've always just seen it as the show altering things, and he does introduce himself as Brynden. However, there are people who say it's not him, but whether that's the case or not, I want to go through this figure's past. Brynden was the bastard son of Aegon Targaryen IV and his sixth mistress, Melissa Blackwood. My guy was collecting mistresses like Infinity Stones and having more kids than Mick Cannon. Brynden, however, was legitimized by his father just before he died. We've seen bastards, of course, get legitimized in the show with characters like Ramsay Bolton. And in what's become a tradition for the Targaryens, it led to a full-blown succession crisis. It's sort of similar to how Viserys inadvertently started off this civil war before his death, and it could be why we start with Brynden and then see what we see next. That is what I believe is the Blackfire Rebellion. This happened while King Daeron II ascended to the throne. There were rumors that Daeron was an Aegon's, with Aegon himself even hinting that wasn't the case. However, he gave him the Blackfire sword, which many said identified the path of succession. It's kind of similar to the Catsport dagger in the show, and it meant Daeron could claim the throne. In the series, Aegon wields the Blackfire sword as well, and many think it highlights that he's the true heir. Now, a few years after Daeron took the throne, Daemon Blackfire took the name of the sword and started a rebellion. He felt like he was the true heir, but in the end he was killed. Brynden sided with his true-born brother and king, Daeron, and lost an eye during the battle. Unlike Aemon, he rarely covered it, but it feels a bit like history repeating itself. The Blackfire Rebellion was a massive thing, and it would continue with a second and third one, to the point where I bet the people of Westeros were just like this.
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this.
Later on, after all the Blackfire rebellions, there was yet another succession crisis as Brynden called together the Great Council after the death of Maekar Targaryen I. If you want a point of reference, it's quite similar to the one we saw at the start of House of the Dragon's first episode. A Blackfire named Aenys or Aenys wished to take part in the council, however, Brynden arrested him upon it.
At Vistaprint, we print your brand on everything, like t-shirts, hats, totes, hoodies, and ooh, really fancy water bottles. So print your team's signature style or seriously impressive merch. At Vistaprint, if you need it, we print it with 25% off for new customers at Vistaprint.com.
So today's the day. I've got my RTA mock system and Coyote appliances. And
his arrival and then had him executed. This led to Brennan being arrested himself after a new king was crowned. Brennan then took the black and went to the wall and later elected to become the Lord Commander. However, he basically did an auto, disappeared for ages, and people thought he was lost beyond the wall. Now after that history lesson, we can pretty safely guess that the three-eyed raven in the vision is indeed Brennan Rivers. The battlefield also seems like the Blackfire Rebellion, and I think it might end up being one of the many spin-offs that we know is now in development. Anyway, the next scene follows a White Walker controlling some fresh-looking whites. It looks like one of the Night King's underlings from the main series, and we might get more of their origin in the upcoming episodes of shows. It's unclear when this is, as it could be when the three-eyed raven was killed after the Night King tracked them down, or be a White Walker leading an army south after the wall fell. It may even be just them marching through the woods, but the tagline of Winter is Coming stemming from this makes it seem like it's around them. This is of course that iconic line from Ned Stark, and we'll discuss what that means later in the video. And next we see that a dragon has fallen during a battle as Daemon walks through the battlefield. I know it's tough to tell exactly what dragon this is, but we have a few contenders in the game. Who's that dragon? Considering we see things from the past and future in these visions, there's quite a few that it could be. Initially I thought it would be one of Dany's dragons, considering we see her eggs later on. However, Rhaegal died at sea after Dany forgot about the Iron Fleet, and Euron Greyjoy hit one hell of a shot. Still, that Korean shooter is cooler, or the one from Turkey. Viserion was notably killed by the Javelin legend the Night King, and he doesn't look like this one. It also doesn't look like any of the ones that we've been introduced to in the show yet, however there is one coming down the line. In our breakdown we said we believe this could be Stormcloud. Stormcloud was ridden by Aegon the Younger, who is in the show about to go to Pentos, and he has a major role to play later on. Aegon managed to take an egg with him, and when he escaped the Gay Bannon, he flew to Dragonstone all the way on Stormcloud's back. This then led into the Battle of the Gullet, which has been set up this past episode, and we should see it play out early on next season. As long as it's not another one of those, it's coming soon episodes, and then it's like, oh, it's going to be another 2 years, mate, go f*** yourself. Either way, it could rival Blackwater Bay, and the later Greyjoy scenes for the best naval battles. There also appears to be a dragon behind it though, so I'm ruling it out as being that. Obviously it helps me out in general when you guys leave a comment though, so come on mate, you tell me who it is and leave a comment. And next we see Daenerys' dragon and the aftermath of her walking into the fire, which took place during the finale of Game of Thrones Season 1. However, just before this, we get a quick shot of what I believe is the Red Comet from Game of Thrones Season 2. We saw this in episode 1 of that season, with people seeing it as either an omen of Robb Stark's victory or an omen for the Lannisters due to its red colour. However, as Osha mentioned, it's simply a signifier that dragons have returned to this world, as we see it lead into the eggs being burned. We may have saw these in House of the Dragon during Season 2 Episode 3 when Rhaenyra sends Aegon to the Vale. The director confirmed that they were one and the same, whereas the showrunner said that they weren't. We know she instructed them to head off to Pentos though, where Daemon lived for a time during Season 1. This is very fun for Game of Thrones fans, as Daenerys' dragon eggs were a wedding gift from Illyrio Mopaptis, who said they were from beyond the Shadowlands beyond Ashai. Nailed the pronunciation there. So if they do keep them as the same eggs, it seems like they'll get lost on their way to Pentos or stolen when they're there. It's not clear, but it's cool nonetheless. Either way, Dany's birth by Salt and Smoke was a huge one. She's thought to be one of the many people who could be the prince who was promised. We've gone into that in detail on a previous video, but Alice mentioning that Daemon has a part to play means all these visions are possibly big parts of Aegon's dream. Daemon next sees you hitting the thumbs up, and we watch him struggling in water. It looks like he's drowning, which is clearly the culmination of the battle above the God's Eye. This will be quite some time in the show's future, as we will need to get past the Battle of the Gullet, as well as Tumbletown, with the latter of these being one of the most harrowing and ghastly chapters in the franchise. Daemon abandoned Harrenhal when Criston Cole came to it, but he later went on to take King's Landing. He then headed back there and faced off against Aemon, leading to both of their deaths. When Aemon's body was found many years later, Daemon's would never actually be recovered. So there's kind of it up in the air whether he's still alive. However, due to what Alice says about him dying there, it seems like that might be the case. Either way, we lastly see the Iron Throne and Rhaenyra sat upon it. This is presented pretty similar to Daemon's introduction in Season 1, as well as his visions of her in Season 2, Episode 4. Each of the visions was about his frustration and entitlement that he should have been the heir. However, as we know, this didn't go down, and he's always felt slighted even when he's became the king. Consort. So this scene is actually prophetic, as she's gonna rule it before it all goes Pete Tong. Sorry, wrong DJ, I meant Eyeball Paul. Is that what Otto's been up to, eh? Now in the final part, Daemon sees Helaena Targaryen in what looks like Eleven's void from Stranger Things. What I love is that later on after speaking with Aemon, we see her suddenly come out of her green sight after he mentions Harrenhal. Bia Saban has really played Helaena masterfully with this ethereal type vibe, and Helaena has a brand new, not so subtle lorddom this time with the vision. Helaena herself has had quite a few different visions over the course of the show, with this being her most clear. No riddles about you will die at the God's Eye. She spoiled it. Now her prophecies take from Daenerys the Dreamer, who predicted the doom of Valyria. She has accepted her fate as just being a player in this great game, which may have happened naturally as opposed to Daemon's weird with better help sessions. One of her prophecies said how Aemon will have to close an eye after Alicent says he will have a dragon, and he will going to lose an eye in the very next episode. She also said, hand turns the loom, spools of green, spools of black, dragons of flesh, weaving dragons of thread. This obviously predicted the dance of the dragons and the tapestries that would be brought forth from it. She also predicted Rhaenys exploding through the floor, one of Season 1's coolest scenes when she said, beware the beast beneath the boards. Initially, I thought she might have meant the blood and cheese attack, but she would predict this in Season 2. She would say, I'm afraid not of dragons, of rats, in the Season 2 premiere before the fateful and cruel night of her child's murder. And lastly, in Episode 6 of Season 2, we see Helaena looked at 3 crickets in cages. She mentions how one stopped singing, and while it was confusing at the time, it seems that the crickets were to represent the 3 dragons without riders. She mentions how one has stopped singing, meaning one has found a rider, which we found out was Adam when he took control of Sea Smoke. Now what I loved about this is how he sees Helaena, and it instantly reminded me of when Bran had visions of the Three-Eyed Raven. Feels like Helena's been able to see everything this time, but she's slowly been growing stronger and stronger throughout the seasons. She says it's a story, which I like to think is a meta-reference, as this is indeed a story, and in Game of Thrones Season 8, we saw Samwell Tarly reveal he was writing a book of everything, which was called A Song of Ice and Fire, which since then, we now know is what Aegon said about his dream, and it's also the name of the overarching book series. Also, I swear, right, in the lead-up to the finale, I was taking the mick at my old job, and I genuinely said the series will end with Sam writing a book called Game of Thrones and saying, it truly was a Game of Thrones, which we didn't get completely right, yeah, but pretty close. Now, there's also some added depth to this scene, as we know that Daemon was the one who sent Blood and Cheese to get a son for a son, leading to her child's death. Yeah, she does not seem to mention it though, and accepts what happened is just part of a story, and they're people without agency. I did find it weird that she simply gave up the king's heir so easily, and didn't put up a fight at all to save her children like Catelyn did when Bran was the target of an assassin. Looking back, knowing what we know now, she knew what needed to happen, and her husband's heir needed to die, so the rest of this Song of Ice and Fire could play out. It's why she may have been so withdrawn and resigned and seem weird during the show, because she knew what needed to happen. Despite this, she does seem to have some semblance of lucidity and question if it's worth it. We saw this when she confronted Aemon in Season 2 Episode 5, as she asked him if it was worth the price. We know that Aemon not only wanted the crown, but that he tried to Cain enable his brother. He burned him, which no one really knows except Helaena, which means she saw his machinations against her husband/brother and did nothing. Here, she outright says that Aemon will die, and says she's seen him burn Aegon, which is indeed the highest of treasons. Now, Alice Rivers has been Daemon's vision guide throughout the entire season, and sort of a witch and such, but she has a major role to play later down the line in the show based on the books. Alice would later go on to take over Harrenhal after the battle above the God's Eye and come to be known as the Witch Queen, which is pretty metal to be honest. She proclaimed to have Aemon's heir inside her belly and gave birth to a son who she claims is the true heir. The claims of her magic and power are disputed in Fire and Blood, but it's thought that she blew a man's head off. However, in the show we can see she does have a connection to the old magic of the world. I do wonder if Aemon will go through this same vision quest, leading to him also playing his part. The vision here in the finale was to ensure Daemon understands he's simply a player in the game, or just a part of the Song of Ice and Fire. This is cemented when he actually bends the knee to Rhaenyra after we expected the fuckboy consort to take the armies and banners for himself, but he came good in the end. He explains that he saw what's coming and that they need someone to unite the realms. Essentially, he saw Aegon's dream, which Viserys described during season 1, and believes that Rhaenyra must be the one true queen to stop what's coming. Viserys chose Rhaenyra to be the heir because he believed she could keep the ship steady until the next heir and also pass on the message. Now this may be a bit of a reach, but if Daemon saw the White Walkers in the future, then he may have seen Daenerys and Jon. He would know that their descendant would bang their auntie, leading to the Long Night being stopped. At least he could see the Battle of Winterfell, because I couldn't say anything. Just a reflection of my tired self in the screen at 3 AM. And it of course also led to that awful season 8 ending, so I guess swings and roundabouts. Anyway, these are all players in the game, and Rhaenyra being on the throne will ensure by her actions that her son Aegon will become king after Aegon. Come on with the names, mate. So with this, the Long Night will be stopped, but there's a lot to happen until then. Obviously, I hope that you're still with us when we cover it, and we've got more House of the Dragon videos to come down the line. That includes a Season 3 prediction one, and we'll also be covering a Night of the Seven Kingdoms when that releases. Hopefully I see you for that as well, and if you enjoyed the video, please drop your thoughts and make sure you hit the thumbs up. Or else, if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please consider clicking the join button. You'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes a massive way towards
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. HBO released the first teaser and first look for the Game of Thrones Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
I just want to see the trailer first, my people's now.
Welcome to the Heavy Spoiler Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Game of Thrones and Night of the Seven Kingdoms. HBO dropped their first look at the show in the upcoming series trailer, and we now know the series is coming next year. Throughout this video, we're going to break down the story and discuss who the main characters are. Obviously, heavy spoilers ahead, so if you don't want it ruined, then I recommend you turn off now. The book is quite a short one, so we will be pretty much going through all of the plot points, which could ruin the entire story. Sorry, but if you enjoy it, please hit the thumbs up and make sure you subscribe for breakdowns on the show. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into A Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
You and I'm Sir Duncan the
Now the series is going to be based around the Hedge Knight work, which comes in both book and comic book form. The first was originally released in 1998, with the latter being dropped in 2003. Marketed as a Game of Thrones prequel, Egg was mentioned by Aemon Targaryen during the main series. But this video though will be primarily using images from the graphic novel because that kinda adds context to what's going on. And pictures are nicer to look at than text, rather than me pretending to read stuff out for 45 minutes a week. Anyway, the first look begins with Sir Duncan the Tall, aka the Hedge Knight. He and his partner in crime Egg have stories that span 3 novellas, with it likely being what the show's gonna adapt. He's obviously known for being tall, and we're likely going to learn of his progeny in the show. George R. R. Martin has said we've met one of his descendants, with him stating he dropped a hint of them in A Feast for Crows. This features Brienne of Tarth finding a shield with his sigil on, and thus people have assumed that she's descended from him. However, at Balticon in 2016, he stated that relationship's not exactly right. He did say that it would be revealed in time, but we're still waiting on the books, George, and it's been nearly 10 years since you said that. Either way though, it's possible the show is going to be where he lays it all out, and there are still people who think that she is his descendant, which I do as well, to be fair. That's because both are unusually tall, and I do feel like things will be revealed here. Either way, we see him riding a horse and also wearing a suit of armor. In the background we can catch an Ashford guard, which is a cool little addition that we'll get into in just a bit. Now in the work we learn that he was a squire of Sir Alan of Pennytree who died at the start of the story. Dunk took his armor and also ended up taking his moniker the Hedge Knight. Duncan ended up giving himself the name Sir Duncan the Tall, which ties into the next moment. We have a character asking his name, which might be someone that he meets at Ashford. Travelling there in the hopes of winning a tourney, he hoped to build a reputation and also gain riches. I believe we see this tournament, or at least the culmination of it, in some of the final shots in the teaser. This happens when he smashes someone like the like button. In the bottom left, you can spot spectators behind barriers, with knights and swords also lying on the ground. There are also torches lining the area, and a large gate with fires burning at the top. So yeah, I feel like this is the tournament, but early on, we'll likely follow his journey there. On the way, he runs into a boy nicknamed Egg, who we catch roasting a fish over a fire. Egg is named Egg because of his bald head, with the character shaving it down. This is because he's secretly a Targaryen, with his name being Aegon. Targaryens, of course, have that distinctive golden hair, except for them 2 strong boys. Now Alan also cut his hair down too in House of the Dragon, and this was done to hide his ties to royalty. So Aegon ends up doing the same thing, and he becomes Duncan's squire, with the pair gaining the nicknames Dunk and Egg. Now upon reaching the tournament, Dunk was almost banned due to not being able to prove he was actually a knight. However, Baelor Targaryen vouched for him, and we know that he'll be played by Bertie Carvel. Now Duncan was let in, but he was told he couldn't use Sir Arlen's coat of arms, so he commissioned his own, which will probably set up things with Brienne. This turns out to be an elm tree silhouetted against the sunset that also has a shooting star on it. This is something Duncan spotted in the sky on the way to the tourney, so it's a nice callback to that. Either way, at the tournament, we meet the show's villain, an Aerion Targaryen. Killing a knight's horse, it's akin to the Mountain doing it in the original Game of Thrones series. On top of this, we discover that Aerion also beats a woman named Tansel. This just so happens to be who Dunk commissioned to paint his new coat of arms, and thus you guys know it's on. Now Dunk ends up defending Tansel when Aerion attacks her, and at this point he's arrested by guards. In order to save him, Egg reveals he's Aerion's younger brother, and he orders them off his friend. However, the debt must be paid, and Dunk has one of 2 options. He can either be mutilated for attacking Aerion, or he can do a trial by combat.
Sometimes I need to paraphrase.
It's easy to make your work clearer and more concise. They're still your ideas, just shorter.
This leads them into something known as the Trial of the Seven, in which 14 knights are divided into 2 sides. They then fight on horseback before going to the ground, and it's basically going to be a massive fight scene. Now this could be what we see at the end of the teaser, with this explaining all the knights on the ground. I feel like if that's the case, then this will be towards the end of the season, as there's a bit where they have to basically recruit all the other 13 knights. Dunk gets a new shield, and so on and so forth, and it's basically sort of an Avengers team-up thing with several knights from several notable houses. For example, that horse that was killed before, that belonged to Sir Humphrey Harding, who joins Duncan's side. We also have Sir Humphrey Beesbury, with Lyman Beesbury being on the council and House of the Dragon. He's the only one who stood up to the Greens usurping, so we have this continued feeling of honour within the family. There's also Sir Lionel Baratheon, you bastard. And in the end, Dunk manages to assemble a team, with Prince Baelor joining the fight as well. I do think one of these knights is who we see practicing in the woods during the teaser, but it is difficult to make out exactly who this is. It looks like a bearded figure, but Baelor has never been described as having a beard. At least to my knowledge anyway. Guy has always had black hair and been clean shaven, so I'm guessing this is one of the others. Drop them below if you know. Either way, the big battle kicks off with it being bloody and brutal. Both Humphreys end up being killed, and Baelor's also mortally wounded. He reveals he's been struck in the head and sadly dies, which will probably be the big emotional death in the series. Dunk, however, comes out on top, and he's then offered a position in the kingdom where he'll officially train Aegon. However, Dunk turns this down and instead wants to travel through the land with Egg as his squire. They bring up how bad the kingdom is and that it's a place that can easily corrupt young boys. This is something we've of course seen in the main series, with Daron apparently being better because he was kept away. So the pair set off on their adventure, which will probably take place in season 2 and 3 if we ever get it. It's a trilogy, so that makes sense, but I do wonder how they're gonna handle the House of the Dragon spoilers. The show obviously takes place after, and thus it could ruin who's on the throne by the end of it. Maybe they just won't mention it, or yeah, maybe Helena will just come out and be like, everyone dies and you're on the throne, but not for absolutely no reason. There's no reason to say that at this point. In the end, though, that's most of the plot points for the series, and I am excited by the first look. I think this is going to be one of your grounded, low-key stories, which Game of Thrones hasn't really done on screen yet. Typically, it's these big bombastic shows, whereas this will be far more personal. I know the show only started filming recently, but judging by the teaser, it seems to be coming along pretty fast. I'm guessing that's down to it not really having dragons in it or massive expansive sets like King's Landing and so on and so forth. Sure, there's things like the tournament, but in terms of CGI, there's probably going to be very little. I think this will fill a gap in the market in these fantasy shows, where we've been wanting these massive overarching wars, but this kind of shows what life's like in Westeros. It even has the potential to be better than House of the Dragon because it's not so reliant on those big shocking moments and the expectation that there's going to be massive dragon battles. I think people with House of the Dragon, especially the recent finale, that they kind of feel disappointed because they've built up this big thing in their head. Whereas this, it's just like, yeah, it's good. Just knights fighting, mate. That's all it is. Just a tournament. So it's easy to keep your expectations in check. So yeah, I am excited to cover that next year, and obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Also, I've just featured on the Chris Information podcast talking about The Boys, Acolyte, House of the Dragon, and so on. It was a really fun chat, just going through the last couple of months.
Excuse me.